Hi, everyone. Welcome and officially good afternoon, good morning, wherever it is you're tuning in from. Thank you so much for joining us virtually today. My name is Hala Alawi, and on behalf of Atmosphere Press, I am so pleased to welcome you to today's reading of new literary fiction and poetry from the press. We'll be hearing from Doug Dunnevant, reading from the novel A Life of Dreams, released May 7th, Travis Hupp, reading from the poetry collection Sin and I, released June 1st, and Bruce Ballard, reading from the collection Invitations, Fiction and Poetry from a Life of Writing, released August 6th. All three authors' books can be purchased both from online retailers and from select bookstores. And of course, as always, you can check the books out on Atmosphere Press's website. That's at atmospherepress.com/books. And I'm also going to put some links directly to the books in the chat for you all. At the end of today's event, we are going to have time for audience questions. So during the readings, if you have a question for one or more of our authors, go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. Other than that, please stay muted for the duration of the event, but feel free to also use the chat for praise and comments. One last note is that we at Atmosphere Press appreciate your support today and always. If you have a manuscript of your own, we would love to read it, so submit your work today to books@atmospherepress.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Doug, Travis, and Bruce today. We're going to be starting off with our first reader, who is Doug Dunnevant. Doug has enjoyed writing and telling stories for most of his life and is pleased to debut his first published novel, A Life of Dreams. In 2014, he published his first book, Finishing Well, the story of caring for his aging parents during the final years of their lives. As author of The Tempest, he has blogged about sports, politics, his family, and the poignancy and hilarity of everyday life since 2011. Doug lives in Richmond, Virginia, but spends as much time as he can on a lake in Maine with his wife, Pam, and their adorable but neurotic golden retriever, Lucy. You can find out more at dougdunnevant.com. In Doug's novel today, after an unsuccessful suicide attempt, Percy Hope moves back home to care for his dying parents and attempts to rebuild his life. That's when the dreams begin. A Life of Dreams unfolds, a story about a man who had it all and a woman who took it all away, leaving them on the edge of despair. And with that, Doug, take it away.
Okay, thank you. By the time he died that Tuesday morning in his sleep, he weighed 100 pounds. Francis, already weakened from the ordeal and so devastated by his loss, was gone by 7 o'clock that evening. They hadn't spent a day apart in 60 years, and tomorrow wouldn't be the first. So after 2 years of tender care and devotion, Percy lost them both in one day and was suddenly, relentlessly alone. All of his life, Percy had longed for a brother or sister, but never more than at the precise moment when he realized that arrangements had to be made to bury his parents, and there was nowhere else to turn. No one to come alongside him, walk him through it, that he was the last surviving hope, a family tree that would henceforth wither. He knew nothing about funerals or cemeteries or nothing of the business of death. A wife would have been nice, even an estranged one, but he couldn't bear the phone call. Ted and Beatrice Clark, next door neighbors for 22 years, would rescue him by finding a plot, while Percy would contend with the Shackelford Funeral Home and its sharply dressed Bob Townsend, Shackelford's most credentialed and celebrated mortician. Bob extended his hand, grasped Percy's elbow with the other, and got a little too close while sincerely whispering, "I am so, so sorry for your loss." Bob then led him into a dimly lit counselor's office, offered him something to drink, and then crossed his hands soberly, looked him into the eyes with the most excruciatingly earnest expression that Percy had ever encountered. Words cannot possibly express the depth of loss you must be feeling at this moment, the intensity of your grief. But at Shackelford's, we pride ourselves on making the best out of bad situations. Percy believed him. How could he not? His suit was dark and impeccably tailored, his hair parted in a perfect line, fastidiously groomed, his eyes tender with concern. He knew how awful this moment was. He felt it professionally. This was his craft, his mission in life, to walk people through the valley of the shadow of death. Percy felt a deep gratitude for Bob Townsend. Bob placed a thick stack of forms on the desk in front of him, and with a soft, whispered tone started with, "You will need to write an obituary. Since you teach college English, I'm sure you will do a fine job. I believe the standard length runs $800. Wait, Percy wasn't sure he understood. It costs $800 to place an obituary in the Times Dispatch. Bob beamed a patient smile Percy's way. For small local newspapers, obits are the vitally important profit center, without which they simply couldn't survive. Most people have no idea. So it's not surprising that you might be taken aback. You can always trim down your remarks to the basics, survived by, etc. Well, there's just me now, so no other family. Well then, problem solved. Bob Townsend was the solver of problems, and that most valuable of assets, an honest guide through a strange and unknown place. Now let's get the financial particulars out of the way first, so we can concentrate on the service. Did your parents have life insurance? Yes, several policies, in fact, but I haven't even begun to fill out the paperwork yet. Not a problem at all, Percy. May I call you Percy, or would you prefer Mr. Hupp? Percy's fine. So how will you be paying for our service? I'll just write you a check today, if that's all right. I have power of attorney. Wonderful. Bob seemed a bit too animated with the wonderful, his voice rising an octave, as though he could hardly contain his excitement upon learning that Shackelford's would be paid today, up front. Briefly, Percy allowed himself to wonder how Bob was paid. Was he on salary, or did he receive a commission? It was a stray thought brought on by a visible lift in Bob's spirits once he had discovered that Percy was not indigent. Now, Percy, let's go back through the showroom, shall we? Wait, there was a showroom? Where could it be? All he had seen was what looked like the insides of a church, long hallways with deacon benches against the wall. Where would a showroom possibly be hiding, and what on earth would be in there? Bob led Percy down a long hallway and opened a double door, which led into a large, dimly lit room with rows upon rows of casket samples, short, sawed-off caskets illuminated with soft directional lights from on high. Every few feet, there were potted plants and great ponderous ferns hanging from the ceiling. Bob directed his attention to a beautifully polished mahogany box protruding from the wall at a provocative angle. This is our finest casket, the Star Legacy Silver Tapestry 1000, with the very best all-velvet interior, polished premium swing handles, sculpted corner, poly-sealed, of course, and completely environmentally friendly. It's very nice, environmentally friendly. Of course, all of our burial homes come with a limited one-year warranty, but we have never had a product failure in the 45 years that we've been in business. Percy, I must say that this Star Legacy would do your beloved parents proud. When the guests arrive and see this fine product at the front of our chapel, they will instantly know how much you truly loved your folks. How much is it? Only a limited warranty? Burial homes? Now, again, this is our top of the line product, and if you were to choose this, you would naturally want to go with the titanium lined crypt. Yes, these crypts are 6 inches of steel reinforced concrete with the finest liner in the industry, titanium, ensuring that your parents will not be disturbed by the elements for a century or more. Yes, that's good to know. How much is it? Percy was starting to feel uncomfortable, similar to the way he felt whenever he bought a car. How long have your folks been married, Percy? Bob placed his arm gently around Percy's shoulder and began steering him away from the Star Legacy and back towards the door. A long time. I really can't remember how many years. I'd say at their age, at least 55 years, wouldn't you say? 55 years of marriage. Now, that's something you don't see much of anymore. And they were so close, so perfectly yoked together that your dear mother couldn't face another day without him. You know, most folks wouldn't look at it this way, but I think that's terribly romantic, don't you? I suppose dying on the same day was anything but romantic, but Bob was the expert. And now they will be united, in a manner of speaking, in death, just as they were in life. Now, wouldn't you want their final resting place to be a place of class and dignity? That's why I guided you to the Star Legacy, Percy. Your parents were special. Even their deaths were special. Our very best is really the only option for you. By the time they were back in the counseling room and Bob had finally gotten around to telling him that Shackelford's very best was going to cost him $26,000, Percy just signed the papers without an objection. He just wanted for it to be over so he could leave this tiny closet, say goodbye to Bob, and leave this suffocating, poorly lit mausoleum. Later that same day, the Clarks had come over the house to fill him in on the $18,000 worth of plots that they had managed to secure over at the Sheltering Arms Cemetery. Beatrice had assured him that Gilbert and Frances' final resting place would be in the finest neighborhood in the cemetery, not 40 feet away from the life-size statues of Jesus and his disciples in what amounted to a very quiet cul-de-sac on Ascension Avenue. Percy thanked them both for helping out and then collapsed into a chair at the kitchen table. In one afternoon, he had managed to spend more than his parents spent in a year. The very last thing he wanted to do was go back to Shackelford for a viewing and face 300 people, but that was the correct protocol, and it had to be done. Percy would try to take a nap and then put on his best suit and head over to meet Bob at 5 o'clock. The 3 hours of the viewing were the most difficult of Percy's life. He had not been prepared for the sight of his father and mother lying cold and still in their mahogany caskets, dressed for church, their skin powdered white, their mouths stitched together, their frail hands crossed piously as they lay snugly in their velvet tombs. Gilbert was skeletal, his cheeks sunken in on his jaws, hardly recognizable. Frances lay silent, her ashen cheeks slathered in makeup to give them color, her lips but thin purple lines cutting across her face. Percy had wanted to slam both lids shut on such a morbid spectacle, but Bob had been there to reassure him of the therapeutic benefits that open caskets provided. He spoke of closure and peace, and as he did so, guided him away from both to a large wingback chair a comfortable distance away. Then the people began to filter in. A serpentine receiving line formed at the viewing room door and down the hall, through the front door and down the sidewalk out front. Everyone was whispering and greeting each other grimly, first walking past the casket, then making their way around the display of flowers towards where Percy stood, greeting them one by one. Percy was gratified at the size of the crowd and what that said about his parents. There were people he hadn't seen in years, people who meant a lot to him, and several whose appearance had surprised him, some whom he didn't even know. Old ladies would greet him in tears with big, tender hugs, telling stories of how much his folks had meant to them years before Percy had even been born. After the first 2 hours, Percy began to wilt under the heavy realization of just how alone and abandoned he truly had become. As each of his friends and colleagues paid their respects, Percy made mental notes of just how poor a job he had done at fashioning strong, secure friendships. Who among these hundreds of well-wishers could he call next week just to go out for coffee and catch up without it seeming forced and awkward? There was no one. About the time he had thought he couldn't handle another minute of the torture, he heard a hush fall over the already hushed crowd. And when he looked up, he saw her signing the guest register. It had been over a year, maybe longer, since he had seen her. And there she was, coming to pay her respects to her former in-laws. Something inside Percy broke. The tide of tears that had been rising for 2 days, unabated, broke through in a torrent. An audible gasp rippled through the room as Percy let out an agonizing groan, then a high-pitched animal-like yelp. His body began to spasm and shake with the violence of his sobs. Beth ran to his side and got there just in time to keep him from falling to his knees. He melted into her arms and she began to cry with him. The gathered mourners covered their mouths with handkerchiefs and looked away. Bob slowly, quietly, expertly took command and thanked everyone for coming. The viewing was over. Beth had also come to the funeral and sat beside him in the chapel. They spoke not a word the entire service. Then she had sat with him on tan folding chairs under the midnight blue Shackelford's tent at the graveside. They had front row seats as the caskets were lowered into the titanium-lined crypts. They saw the preacher toss handfuls of red clay in after them. After the last amen, Percy and Beth tossed single roses into the great yawning pits and watched them bounce off the polished mahogany. Again, no words, just a parting hug. Percy watched her walk away in her elegant black dress, silky black gloves covering her arms to the elbows. Without looking back, she got into his old Mercedes and drove away.
Thank you so much, Doug. I mean, we're already seeing from the audience, this tangle of emotions is already resonating with people. So thank you for sharing that particular section with us today, too. So reading next today is Travis Hupp. Travis lives in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, where guys like him sometimes have to make their own fun. Sin and I is his second book. His first, Faster Annihilators, is also available wherever books are sold. From the author of Faster Annihilators comes more of the poetry that literary titan called mind-bending, captivating, and undeniably heart-wrenching. Employing free verse, kwansabas, pantoum, and haiku, Hupp takes us on a journey that encompasses anger and despair over the personal and the political, but ultimately leads to faith, hope, and abiding love. Travis, the mic is yours.
Great, thank you very much. All right, I'm going to start with a short one called Density. They'll try to make you think a density of lies is a complexity of lies, but no, it's just dense, it's not deep, so it makes no sense to lose any more sleep. So I'm going to go right to a longer one. This one's called Throwing Bones. Silence might kind of sting now. The forest and I had a fight. Now the birds are cold shouldering me and the bugs are getting in my eyes. The neighbors are restless, if those are the neighbors tromping about, trampling my focus, amazed by everything, interminably loud. I'll crank my volume up too then, roar my poetry till it shakes down some leaves. Delighted to meet everybody, I'll boom. It's not exhausting at all, feeling everything so deeply. If you really listen to the way the verses interplay, I think you'll find the message is clearly go away. I guess they never get it because they stay. Sure, art's subjective, but it isn't today. I have a clear point in my line of sight, something profound like most people mostly lie. I have no idea if that's true, which reinforces my thesis, but I'm struck with surly sentiments that keep away transcendence. What gangly monster am I writing here, and what does it need to accomplish? It's never for nothing what waits to emerge till now. Something important tends to eventually spill out. Important to poets anyway, who walk around pondering big questions like, do onions know? It's still hard to believe such investigations can earn a living, but I've seen the proof they can earn a subsisting. Most art is starved by capitalism till it can only be known by throwing bones. If I won't say that's okay, does that tacitly condone the insurrection? Could it possibly even matter? Poetry's lost on redneck petulance. I am lost and not entirely loathing it. I find fragments of fulfillment in fits. Count the rings of 100 trees hacked down in a killing spree to clear some clean air out of the way of humanity. Like any invasive species, we massacre what we please. Make homes of our stolen habitats so comfy and pretty. The dead and displaced just manifest destiny. We stroll by souls slumped in streets, spare them snack money barely, take pity rarely. It's also vibrant and fatal, such deprivation drowned out by so much first world festivity. Sickening smog, choking our therapy dogs, the clash of cussing crazies and cat-calling carnies. So many points lose their edge, so many meanings get mulled over and spooled out well past their mark. Teenage folly distracts me, kids bragging too big for their britches, trashing the trap house across from the park, blaring songs full of slurs, a little light on heart. Is youth no longer a synonym for idealism? I try to detect some social conscience and I'm traumatized by a twerking train wreck. I don't know for sure every substance they're on, but they're so wide open they're like a meal for cop. It presents a dim view as the day falls to dark. I regard them over my notebook, seeking some substance in their rebellion spark. But these kids won't fight conformity. They seem like the type to fight to conform. Same swagger, same style, depressingly uniform. My disappointment is unreasonable, unfathomable. Sudden rain slashes at me sharply like God caught me judging, so I caught the storm. I lurch away from lances of lightning, run rumpled through the downpour, admonished by my Lord. This next one is called Good Thing. People try to block me. Everyone together stops me. I'm alone and surrounded, broken apart by sirens sounding. I say God first and no one knows who I mean. I say you first and no one thinks the next step is safe. I say me last and everyone seems to agree. Good thing I believe in eternity. This is another short one. It's a Kwansaba called Sin and I. God says have faith in his son. The cards say hurt and move on. Logic says don't count on the sun. Odds say I'm due to face a gun. No one alleges I'll find the one. No one hits me up for fun. Sin and I had quite a run. This one's called The Trap. One-man battalion, standard grade bombardment, of energies pulsing, of puerile insults that nearly make sense. Now you're curious, conversing. How long past midnight with what revenant? Just like that, the trap is set. All hell, was it you said? What of Avalon? Whose sundry strategy? Who inherits whose debts? Past and present tense arcing away on wings of darkness. All at once, all syllables sound, a wall of words, I just can't parse it. Except as they glide for skies far and away, they circle overhead to call in unison, you'll pay, oh yes, you'll pay. What manner of tribute could I have paid in days hence? What ill-gotten bling did I bring under dark hypnosis? All words encompassed, every one rendered dubious. Abstract nouns are slithering around, led by voyeurism. Spite is here, turning curiosity to jealousy and suffocation. Sex is here, saying, look, screaming, lech, sighing, none for you. Despondence dumbs me down. Fastidiousness finds some screws loose. Gluttony so good to me. If we're goners, let's eat everything. Chewing the scenery, it's chewing us back, devouring everywhere, right off the map. This next one is called Beckett. Dividing and dividing, each into cells and all the words' meanings. Shouting over walls while bricking them higher. Divided, you against me against a simplistic reading of reality. My fault who I was, but I splintered him off me, broke him into shards and snide barbs against the walls and floors and ceilings of identity. The vanishing voices keep returning. A poem that was singular, dividing, keeps dividing. An army of agitation unleashed. Who summoned who with what beckon? What wretched aspect runs me down to reckon? This next one's called Wander On. Somewhere out there are infinite branches of reality, forming dimensions where I get screwed over completely differently. Where I run the wrong guy off instead of letting him stay. Where I wander off a curb without glancing either way. Where I hold my peace and run my mouth in opposite instances, pursue unlikelihoods to different distances. Where I stop writing after middle school or never even begin. Fall out of love with my lonely hobbies, where I pick up a gun instead of a pen, where I keep far better records of the order in which who played who for a fool, where I entertain all different folly, only go to jail for things I do. Somewhere a me aborted, or a me who dies young and memorably, A me who dies gnarled and forgotten, hoping he helped anyone with anything. Infinite permutations of 1 in a billion hapless dudes, happier than his circumstances suggest, tripping after abundant truth. And this one's called God's Creation. Storms are God's creation, purifying pummeling. We hunker where we need to. Weather Channel isn't foolproof. Few things ever are, but there's another world that's ours. A clearing of debt for a promise kept. Let's hold up our side. Heaven, let's try. Prayer while fasting, voice of spirits undelineated, people sent to each other surely for something more than hedging our bets. I answered your knock, let you in from the elements. You still haven't said what storm chased you to my step. This next one is called Stupid Falling Star. Instantaneous poetry. 3 words, 4 syllables, life is lonely. Is this genius yet? What have decades of freestyle beget? Torturous, yes, but still I submit, flying blind more often than I care to admit. I don't know exactly how I'm injured, how I have been all along. Even the paths most gilded cast only iron thoughts. The beseeching clang of my steel on empty plates in a mess hall where only I starve, while everyone else makes easy meals of every stupid falling star. Still they talk at me, pretentious enough, to tell me what hurts who, how much. This one's called The Same in the Dark. You can't really suffer if you really don't care. That's why villains can't be punished and heroes can't be spared. The person somewhere between, unsure what the differences mean, just languishes. Heroes and villains abuse the same languages. They look the same in the dark, patronize the same bars. Maybe it's best to lock yourself alone in your room and battle the hero and villain in you. This next one is called Heart of a City. I guess this is it. I'm really doing it. Leaving, arriving, as I please, on my own schedule, in the heart of a city whose heart is changing color. I, in my basement apartment, will play my part to influence the spectrum. But damn, I start out feeble, shaky and in the red. I still don't fully believe. I still can't fully forget that I'm doing this alone now, by myself, for myself. That the city's heart, like any others, may simply not accept me. That every foot set outside might turn me right back in. That I don't know how I've gone so long without, so I'm willing naked need to mean the sprawl will supply my demands. This next one is called If. If you're looking for a reason to give up, you'll eventually find one. If you're looking for transformative love, remember you're God's fortunate daughter or son. If you need someone to bail you out, people care more if you don't bring them down. If you know verve means movement, show some and move it. If you get better, I'll say I always hoped I knew it. If I know anything, it's that ghosts never stop speaking. If you don't want to be one, mine relentlessly for meaning. If nightfall finds you lonely, treat yourself friendly. If day finds you rebounding, treat the less lucky gently. If people don't understand you, don't try too hard to understand why. If you understand you, smile big, don't be shy. If grief grabs you suddenly, hold it close and mourn with it. If relief is unthinkable, link with me, we'll think more of it. If that doesn't get you humming, it'll never be for lack of trying. If you sit me down and say you'll listen, it won't help if you're lying. If things can never be on the level, it might all capsize into the sea. If you don't want me with you, I don't want you with me. This next one is called Past Mattering. It's just a short. I can't say for sure I'd notice if you slipped in a lie, if your studded ear was gleaming, caught right by the light, if your words were past mattering, if I could only hear your voice. I can't say for sure I'd believe in you if I felt it were a choice. This one's called True to Myself. Here I am. I found me. Damn, it's good to see me. I'm holding my own hand now. Losing me was too easy. I still love you like crazy. I'd still put you before me, but you disappeared on both of us, so I'm respecting your right to ignore me. I hope you answer yourself when you cry out, wondering what the hell happened. Even if you never miss me, I wish you every happiness. I still carry the torch, still cradle the candle. So what? So sue me. That's just me being true to myself. I didn't give up, you did. This one's called Nightmares of You. I know where we're headed, but not where I'm going. I know what you're doing, but not where we'll end up. Long ago, when creation started unfolding, anything anywhere must have seemed like enough. Not long ago, my heart was stolen. Now love just feels too easy to corrupt. I know what I mean, but not how you'll take it. I know you're too mean to ever let me say it. Long ago, you came over and shared my blankets. You talked me into touching you and then blamed me for it. Sometimes I have nightmares of you eclipsing my moonlight. Sometimes I have dreams that you'd help me fight. Every single person who hates our potential, every solitary demon born of my solitary confinement, every damn twist of fate like a blade stabbing deeper, would you stem the flow or leave me for the reaper? This next one is called Precipice, and it is dedicated to the memory of my dog Oz, who I had from 2007 to 2023. I don't know if you can see or not. That's a picture of him right there. It's not that I'll ever, for a second, consider you gone. I feel your amiable presence around bends in your old ambling trail. Glimpse your astral body in the ricochet of sunbeams laughing, your smile wide with soul on your measured mare-like stroll. It's just that the last hug wasn't labeled as such. I didn't know the chicken nugget split down the middle with your sister would be your very last half a nugget ever. I didn't predict the last time I walked you would be our last time side by side and both alive. I did predict you'd walk beside me still, and my boy, I was right, because now you're love a light. Still, my center is shocked trying to process the memory of reaching down to pick you up and finding only the heaviness of a body. The sudden heart rend on such a scale that the pumping red muscle fluttered like some precarious bird in my chest, lame-winged, teetering on the precipice. I held you, tried willing your warmth back. I couldn't get it to work, but I seemed to freeze, steadied myself against the onrushing walls of blind grief. I stumbled numbly. I am still stumbling. What fell was everything. What falls is everything. How am I on time? Yeah.
We're actually just about at 15, so that's kind of perfect.
All right.
Well, thank you
Thank
so
you very
much,
much.
Travis, and for, showing us a little bit of the inside of the pages too, and in addition to that, reading as well. So yeah, thank you for that.
No problem.
Our,
Thank you.
yeah, of course. Our final reader for today is Bruce Ballard. Bruce has visited over 25 countries for work, sports, and vacation, publishing stories, academic articles, and poems along the way. At age 60, he learned that he had Parkinson's disease, but instead of stopping him, Parkinson's gave him more to write about, some of which he compiled into the pages of the book you now will hold in your hands. Parkinson's said, "Slow down." Bruce shot back, "Not on your life, or mine either." In Invitations, Fiction and Poetry from a Life of Writing, you'll witness how one writer navigates this question. What would you do if you were told you had Parkinson's disease in the prime of your life? We see this not only through Bruce's writing about Parkinson's, but also through the exploration of related themes such as life, love, sickness, and death. Now let's welcome Bruce.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear okay? Okay, so before I begin, I thought I would just point out this may be the first time in Western civilization that someone with Parkinson's disease wrote a poem about Parkinson's disease and is now reading it on the internet. So and it's not just a poem, it's a sonnet. So the title is Appointment with My Neurologist, a Movement Disorder Specialist. Have you fallen yet? She always asks in her floral scarf and white lab coat. Feeling dizzy, spit caught in your throat, frustrated that you can't do daily tasks? She makes me tap my fingers, tap my toes, like this, and follow with my eyes her roving pen. Up and down and side to side it goes, a font of jokes for a comedian. Well, Parkinson's is not some morbid joke, yet in her office, all these tasks evoke a childish sense of humor, soaring mirth that does not flag or drag me down to earth. What have I learned from my movement disorder? Between mirth and death, it's just a hazy border. Okay. I'm reading this off my computer screen. I gotta scroll. That doesn't sound right. Okay, the next poem is called Death on a Bicycle. If you train on a road bike during the brutally hot summer in Niigata, Japan, your most valuable equipment, more than gloves, helmet, or spare tires, is sunglasses. There are gnats. As you breeze beside the rice paddies and through the bamboo forests, they stick to your eyes. When you zoom down the gorge at Tainai so fast that spit escapes from your mouth to crawl up your cheek like a living thing, gnats stick to your spit and sweat and lodge in your eyes where they die. You can shower off the dirt, scrub clean the toothy grin tattooed on your leg by the bicycle chain. But when you step from the bathtub, feeling pure as dawn, you look in the mirror and see dead bodies still stuck in your eyes. Little black dots, premonitions of death. Someday your entire eyes will be nothing but black. So you buy sunglasses, the wraparound kind that shield on all angles, and fool yourself that you are avoiding death on a bicycle. But you can't avoid death on a bicycle. And in your race for vitality, you promote the very thing you abhor. A frog goes pop under the tire. A beautiful butterfly zigzagging haphazardly meets the brutal blender of your spokes, its wings crunching softly like a cookie in your mouth. Well, when you die, we'll cremate your body, take the ashes to the bridge spanning the Tainai Gorge, the bridge you shot over so many dawns, the mist stretched above the river like a sleeping serpent, and fling your ashes into the water to be examined by the fish for a moment, then ignored. Then we'll walk back to our sensible cars with the wrap around windshields, our heads parting the clouds of gnats, remembering you and your cycle. So next I'm going to read some part of a story. It's the beginning part of a story I titled Rufino. Make myself count. Disculpe, pero hablan tzotzil. It was fall 2001, right after September 11th, when you met Rufino and his sister Gloria, standing in the checkout line at your supermarket in Jackson Heights, a working class neighborhood in Queens that's notable for having residents and restaurants from countries around the world, and for two subway lines that intersect. One, the number 7 train, elevated high above ground, and the other, the combination E, F, M, and R lines, below ground. You were in the supermarket's express lane, right by aisle 1, fruits and vegetables, not paying any attention to anything in particular, when suddenly you heard two people You heard the two people behind you slip from Spanish into Tzotzil, one of the indigenous languages of Chiapas, Mexico, where you taught English for many years and did graduate research. Excuse me, but are you speaking Tzotzil? They stared at you, both astonished. Both appeared in their early 20s. The man was a few inches over 6 feet tall, but the woman much shorter. They had perfectly round faces, round heads, and were clearly siblings. The hairline of the man's crew cut was smoothly curved and as sharply delineated as a seam on a basketball. His protruding lower lip cast a shadow from the supermarket's overhead lights, and his eyes looked alert but afraid, cautious. You couldn't tell. The woman's face, however, flipped from astonishment to serenity with the faintest smile. Her face at that point could have been a depiction of Buddha, except for the swag of bangs that swirled diagonally across her forehead like a tree root. Behind them stretched aisle one's produce, and their clothing couldn't have contrasted more. Surrounded by a background of blazing lemons, purple eggplants, bright orange carrots, and bunches of dark green spinach, the two Tzotzil speakers wore faded blue jeans and loose off-white t-shirts. You stood there equally astonished. In this section of Queens, it was normal to hear Mexican Spanish, and you couldn't often help eavesdropping. But this code switching into an indigenous language startled you. The two of them were inserting Spanish words for food items like pan, bread, arroz, rice, aceite, oil, into otherwise Tzotzil sentences, a language you had studied and in a graduate school paper had described as sibilant, which was sibilant sounds that were markedly more sh than s, interspersed with staccato glottal stops. Your professor accepted your coinage of sibilant, but drew a big red X, where instead of interspersed, you wrote interspersed. What happened next in the supermarket surprised you further. The young man smiled warily and responded in perfectly natural American English. Yes. How do you know Tzotzil? Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Bruce. That was like a really good, well-rounded kind of take on the book that you were able to present us in that reading. So yeah, thank you so much for that.
My pleasure.
So at this time, we do have time for our audience Q&A. So if anyone has a question for one or more of our authors, just go ahead and type those in the chat and I'll make sure they get asked. We do have one question that's for all three of you. This question is, what is it about writing that draws you to it? Kind of a big question, but to start us off, if we could go in reading order. So Doug, do you want to start us off with this one?
What is it about writing that, what was it again?
That draws you to it.
Oh, well, it's a way to communicate things that are hard to say. You know, it's a lot easier to write sometimes than it is to speak. And sometimes words just fail you when you're trying to talk. And when you write and there's not the pressure of an immediate response, it's more thoughtful. And for me, it's always been a lot cheaper than therapy.
That's a good take on it. Yeah, I think for a lot of people, actually, that aspect of writing is really what kind of makes it attractive. So I'm not surprised to hear that. Travis, what about you? What draws you to writing?
It's a way of engaging with the world on your own time, on your own terms. A way to kind of deal with your emotions in the ups and downs of the world than your life, and not have to have somebody come at you later and be like, oh, well, this really isn't fair. You weren't 100% fair to every perspective here, because it's also a creative endeavor. So you can know that and still kind of in a poem air out the way that something makes you feel at a certain time without having to fact check everything to death and make sure that everything's 100% realistic to what actually happened. And it just helps for all my life, has helped me deal with issues that otherwise would have been really hard to deal with. And I'll say it helped as much as therapy for me, because I also have some therapy under my belt, but my therapist always encouraged me to write as well. So there you go.
Yeah, I love that idea of you can kind of maybe not bury things so much, but it gives you a little bit more creativity, some freedom with the poetry format rather than,
Right.
strict memoir, let's say.
Yeah.
So yeah, how about you, Bruce? What is it that draws you to writing?
Well, first of all, it's a compulsion. So I like that. Second of all, I like to write fiction because I like to create characters and put them in a difficult situation and see what they do about it. And third, once I started my blog about Parkinson's disease, I started writing sonnets. I have no idea why I chose sonnets and haiku. I wrote 100 haiku about Parkinson's disease. So I guess that's another way of saying it's a compulsion.
Yeah. I think a lot of writers will agree with that sentiment. And for people who don't necessarily write, I think it's a little bit hard to understand sometimes, but it really is, it's a compulsion, just like you said. So, yeah, all of these, I love that we pose this question to more literary poetry writing authors, because I love all these answers and I really resonate with all of them. We do have a question that's specific to Doug. This person says, although you've had work published before, you said this is your first novel. Is novel writing your favorite genre to write in, or did you prefer something like nonfiction?
I've enjoyed novels a lot because they're so complex and they take months and months to do, and they take up residence in your mind, in your brain, and they won't leave until you finish. So it's a chance to really develop characters and stuff. But I've been writing a probably 5 times a week blog for about 13 years, just observational things. And that's really my favorite type of writing, because you can just write about one thing and get it out of your head and it's done and you move on. But novels are fun. You create a universe that you control, and when you're not writing and the novel's half done, you feel like these people are in suspended animation until stop horsing around and get back to work. So it's kind of, I just like novels too. So
Yeah, well, I'm partial to fiction in that way myself, so totally understand. This is a question now for Bruce. This comes in from James. There is such a wide range of topics in your book. How did you decide which topics to include in this volume, and is there a thread that connects all of them?
Uh, I don't think there's a thread that connects all of them because they were written at different times. And how did I decide what to include in the book? I just took what was available. I could always go back to my blog site about Parkinson's and pull more sonnets or haiku. But other than that, all of the fiction was stuff that I was already working on. And it was all my recent stuff. So that's how I decided. Does that answer your question, James?
Well, I think that is a pretty good question. I think sometimes it's a little bit more nebulous, sometimes it's more specific. So we actually had a private message came in, a very similar question for Travis. how do you know when a collection of poetry is complete? So what are your thoughts on this type of thing, Travis?
It's kind of just, I get this sense when it's at a good length and it has said a bunch of things that I feel are pressing to say without hopefully saying the same things over and over and over again. For my first book, Faster Annihilators, I tried to get 100 poems for that one, and I ended up having about 85 exactly 85 that I really love. So I went with 85 for that one. Sin and I, the one I read from today, is 96 poems long. So with my third one, hopefully I'll actually get to that sweet spot of 100 poems. The goal is to kind of keep making each of them just a little bit bigger and say a little bit more without collapsing under their own weight. So, but I tend to find themes in my work, and once I've explored those themes to some kind of logical break point or end point, then I feel like the collection is done.
Yeah, again, kind of not a super clear-cut way to know, right? But
Yeah.
I think every writer has their process with that, I suppose. We've got another question for Bruce. This is from Linda. Do you think that writing is a great deal of problem solving to achieve answers to our lives?
Um, it could be. It could be for some people. For me, like my whole blog about Parkinson's disease is just my way of just understanding it better. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I was looking for the unmute button. Yeah, it's a big question, but I think really, I mean, with everything that kind of asks you to dig deep, like writing does, or like life changes do, I mean, yeah, I think it's going to be really helpful to explore that through the medium of writing. So, at this point, I just want to say thank you to all of our authors for bringing their books to us and bringing these stories alive in their own voices. Yes, just like Bruce is doing, snaps for all of you. So thank you so much to Doug, Travis, and Bruce for being generous with your time, your words, your thoughts today, and to the audience for being here with us and sending in these really insightful and thought-provoking questions for sure. And don't forget also that you can order A Life of Dreams, Sin and I, and invitations from the links in the chat. I just put them in there one more time for everyone. Please also consider checking out atmospherepress.com to browse our new and forthcoming releases, sign up for our email newsletter, or to submit a book manuscript of your own. You can submit your work to books@atmospherepress.com and just let us know that you attended today's event. But until then, we'll look forward to hearing from you. But that's it for today. So have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Yes, thank
Thank
you,
you very
everybody.
much.
Thank you. Good to see you.